You just mentioned you were on the topic of censorship, and I think you mentioned something about 1955.
Yes, I think it was in 55 that we submitted the Power and the Glory, and we were refused. And a little later, we submitted the Trois-Pennies opera. And the father there, again, Father Dautel, said, are you laughing at me, or are you being candid? So we realized that as the time was going on, it would be tougher and tougher to work in such conditions, and we decided to leave Le Jésus, and we were able to rent a place called the Orpheum Theatre. That was originally a theatre, and that had became a cinema. And it was owned by, I don't remember, one of the majors. I don't remember exactly which it was. And we rented the place for a relatively good amount of money. If I remember well, the first year we paid something like $1,300 a week. But the place was our place. We were able to do whatever we wished to do in it. And we had no censorship. So that was very important for us. And Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde stayed there till the year it was demolished. It was a very nice theatre, very nice theatre. I'm convinced that during the present time it would not have been demolished. It would have been restored, I'm sure.
So much was lost, but then after the Duplessis period, so much was also gained. I believe you said around 1960 in La Patrie that Quebec theatre was in transition, a transitional state. Has it ever emerged from a transitional state? Is it still?
Well, maybe the theatre is in a constant transitory situation. No, being serious, I think that the theatre here has come to a level of quality that is undeniable. The productions are first class. We produce more and more national authors' plays, playwrights' plays. The drama is that outside of some commercial enterprises, and there are very few of them. Roux is one, for example. La Cage aux Folles was another. But it is some very, very rare occasions. The theatre here needs the support of the public bodies, of the state, and it's natural. If you travel all over the world, you find the same situation. Either it's in Great Britain or in France or in Germany or in Italy. I'm speaking only of our Occidental world, but I think it's the same situation all over the world. Culture is expensive as far as money is concerned, but it is essential. And it is a shame that the governments are more and more trying to step back from the artistic and cultural field and try to pass the hand to the private enterprise. It's not the same thing at all. You're not as free towards the private enterprise as you are towards the public bodies like the Canada Council or the Department of Cultural Affairs. ESSO, for example, if ESSO gives Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde some money to produce a play, immediately the artistic director of Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde will exercise censorship without being conscious of it, probably. but definitely she or he won't choose a play that would antagonize Esso. I'm mentioning Esso, it can be any other industrial company. And moreover, the private enterprise is so much solicited that they're out of money as far as culture and arts are concerned. So we're going through, and it's not peculiar to Quebec, I think it's the same situation all over Canada. We're going through a very difficult situation. And I'm not trying to say that money is the solution to everything. No, that's not true. Sometimes a lack of money brings you to use your imagination to try and find some solutions which are not entirely monetary solutions. But when those restrictions develop in being so heavy that you cannot move anymore, that you cannot use your imagination anymore, that you cannot use your creative powers anymore, that's a terrible situation. And that's the situation we're going through presently. And since the budgetary situation of the country, generally speaking, is catastrophic, unfortunately, we have to fight the cuts that the government is contemplating to exercise towards the Canada Council, for example, to speak of only one institution. That would create, if ever possible, a worse situation than ever if they start cutting in the Canada Council budget, which, mind you, are peanuts in the global figure of the budget of the country like Canada.
You mentioned that the cultural, there was no cultural affairs department at one point. You had to get funding from another Quebec.
The Secretariat. The Secretariat.
Was this the Duplessis period?
Yes.
And what was it like in the Duplessis period, the funding situation? Was it a nightmare?
We had no grants. We had very, very, very scarcely a grant. For example, the first time we went to play in Paris for the Le Théâtre des Nations, we had, I think it was a $10,000 grant from the Secretariat of the Province of Quebec. And I mentioned that we had that grant of $2,000 for our contest, and that came, if I remember well, from the Department for Youth. Paul Sauvé was the minister, and he was to become the prime minister after Duplessis died. But we tried to have a meeting with Mr. Duplessis at one point, and we used the influence of Marc Drouin, who was the chairman of our board at that time, who was very close to l'Union Nationale. So politically speaking, we were not in the same gang, but he was a very nice chap. And we had a meeting with Duplessis. He was very charming, and he spoke. He didn't gave us one occasion, I think, to speak of our problems. No, he spoke and spoke and spoke. He told us that he met with Maurice Chevalier and that it was a great time for him, etc., etc. And we went out of there, saying to ourselves, well, we didn't say a word about Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde. And it was a fact. And Duplessis was able to do that, He was a very able man in such situations. So no grants at all. But it was under the Duplessis regime that the department was created, the Department of Cultural Affairs, and the first minister was Jean-Noël Tremblay. And then we started getting some grants from that department. A few years later, I think, then the Canada Council was created.
Can I just totally change the subject and briefly jump to a summer theatre starting in '56 with Paul Hébert in Saint Adèle and the Théâtre de Marjolaine, founded by Marjolaine Hébert. What was their impact on the Quebec scene? Were they barely noticed? Were they a major...
At the beginning, they had no impact at all. I spoke of commercial enterprises a little earlier. Those were commercial enterprises, successful enough, but the choice of the plays and the quality of the productions were such at the beginning that there were no impact on the Quebec theatre. It should be hoped that the summer theatres would develop a new public, and that public would be interested in coming to the theatre during the fall and winter period. But that was not the fact. The summer theatre public was a public of its own, and generally speaking, they would not come to the theatre in the cities. Mind you, it developed a lot. It developed too much, in fact, because there are so many summer theatres presently in the province of Quebec that season after season, some of them have to close their doors. And little by little, some of the summer theatre changed their choice, and even if the plays are lighter plays than the plays that are usually produced during the regular period, the works are of a higher quality than they used to be at the beginning of the summer theatre's venture. And maybe I don't know, I cannot say for sure, but maybe the summer theatre public are starting to come to the theatre during the regular period of the year.
As in English Canada, in French Canada, radio and television was needed to supplement your incomes, as
yes.
you mentioned earlier. Can you mention some of the key players in the radio and television period in the early years? Some of the main names.
Radio, it's hard to say. No, I don't really remember of. Oh yeah, yes, that's true. For example, on radio we had daily what we called Radio Roman. Those were a series of 15 minutes a day, five days a week, on various subjects, but very realistic plots and situations, a very daily affair. Yes, and a part of that, there used to be dramatic programs. One was called the Théâtre Ford. It was sponsored by Ford, and it was a 1-hour theatre a week. A part of that, we had what we called les Radio Collège. And that was some programs intended to the students at, let's say, the secondary level, particularly, or the collegial level. And we used to play all the great classical plays on such programs, Shakespeare, Molière, Chekhov, etc., etc., etc. And I think that we were very happy to be able to play in such programs. And being conscious of having a role to play in the development of our society through those programs. But mention names would be difficult. Roger Citerne.
Can you instead tell me, give me an idea of what it was like to work in, say, a radio play, one of those radio romans? What was it like in the studio? What were the sound effects? What were the feelings?
Those were productions. We had the feeling that we were producing for a factory. That was the same situation. We would come an hour earlier than the show time. We would rehearse for about an hour. Yes, we had some sound effects, but not very. How should I say it? I'm missing the word, but the simplest sound effects, you know. And I think that those radio romans were honestly produced, but we had the feeling of doing a job, a factory job, not really doing our own playing a play, doing a production, having something to do with the trade we were in, as compared to the Radio Collège programs or the dramatic programs like le Radio Théâtre Ford, or another one which was sponsored I think by Molson, which was called le Théâtre Molson. And le Théâtre Molson was adaptations of great operas for the radio. And they were using singers, but since it was only an hour, they had to adapt the opera, and they used actors in order to make the length of time shorter, using dialogues instead of songs, and trying to match the sound of the voice of the singer with the sound of the voice of the actor. But that was fun to do. I think that television had a more important part to play immediately when they started. If I refer to the Plouffe family, for example, people were seeing on the screen some other people, but that were so familiar, that were so with such a seemingness with them, that they had the feeling of being in the image, in the screen itself. And that was new, because the radio could not have the same impact. And at that time, Radio-Canada, CBC, which was stationed in Montreal, both, were all by themselves. There were no other television channel. So a few thousand, 100,000 people were looking at the same screen at the same time. And it created, I think, a feeling of being part of the same society. I think it was important. On the other hand, again, you had programs like les téléthéâtres, which were the counterpart of les radiothéâtres, during which the great plays were produced and performed by directors who developed to be first-class directors, first-class television directors. I'm thinking of people like Jean-Paul Fugère, for example, or Louis-Georges Carrier, or some others. I don't remember all the names, but at the beginning of television, we, as stage actors, were feeling very condescendent to the medium. We were doing it in order to earn our lives, and then going back on stage and really live what we considered as being what we had to do in life. But when we were engaged in the production of a téléthéâtre, it was another business. We had the feeling of really doing something that was part of our own profession, and we learned to be entirely confident to the directors who were organizing that thing, like Jean-Paul Fugère, and those téléthéâtres were live. So it had another quality that is not present. Anyway, we have no such programs presently in the programmation of at least Radio-Canada. I don't know much about CBC, but there is nothing comparable to what was going on during that period as far as the téléthéâtre were concerned. They were great.
You briefly mentioned the Plouffe family, and it had its roots in radio, in fact. Is it true that some people really thought you were Ovid Plouffe, the
Oh, yes.
intellectual
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Mind you, I didn't perform Ovid on radio. I don't remember who performed Ovid on radio, but I started performing it on television in '53, I think. Oh yes, we made a tour with Le Théâtre du Nouveau Monde in '58, a pan-Canadian tour, and Denise Pelletier was part of the tour of the Théâtre du Nouveau Monde company at that time, and she was performing Cécile in the Plouffe family, and I was performing Ovid. And when we used to arrive in a place like Calgary or Vancouver, and being introduced to some of the public after the show or before the show, immediately a question would come up: where's the rest of the family? Oh, you're traveling together by yourselves. Where's Mother Plouffe? Where's Papa Plouffe? You know.
Yeah, that's excellent. Gracia and Jelena began appearing in the Plouffe family in '57 as an argumentative young farmer.
Yes.
Yeah. Did he have a regular role? Or is that occasional?
It was not regular in the sense that it didn't come back every week. I don't think so. But it was a character that used to come back a few times in the season.
You mentioned you were in English Canada. They recognized you. Obviously, the show was on in English.
Yes.
You did 2 productions a day, didn't you? Could you tell me about that?
We did 2 productions a week. The French production was on Wednesday. So we used to start rehearsing on Monday morning, rehearse Monday, Tuesday, come into the studio on the Wednesday. We used to rehearse all day till the end of the afternoon or the beginning of the evening. We would break and then come back for the program itself, which was on from 8:30 to 9. And sometimes it was very tough because we were performing on stage at the same time. Fortunately enough, we used to bring the curtain up at 9 at that time. And since we were performing the Plouffe in a studio on Stanley Street, corner of, at that time, Dorchester, and that the program itself ended some a few minutes before 9, because after that we had some commercial advertisements. We were able to leave the studio around 5:02 and rush to the Jésus Hall, which was about 5 minutes from the studio. And we used on such a day to bring up the curtain at 5 after, for example, and be able to perform. And the morning after, on Thursday, we would go back in the rehearsal hall, rehearse in English, go back to the studio on the Friday morning, do the same thing as as we did on the previous Wednesday, and perform from 9:30 to 9, from 8:30 to 9 in English.
Some people wanted a sort of anglicized English version, with English actors or something?
No. We were always using the same actors, for the worst or the better. I say the worst or the better because some of us, like Maman Plouffe, for example, didn't know at all what they were saying in English. And they didn't know how to pronounce No, I remember Maman Plouffe saying, "Bring the police," or "Call the police." But apparently it was greatly, how would I say that, appreciated by the English-speaking public. They loved it, in fact, generally speaking.
The National Theatre School, would you agree that it had an impact in the Quebec and Canadian theatre in the early days? I know it does now, but did it immediately?
Yes, immediately. It's important to say that the National Theatre School came out from our first the first time we performed in Stratford in '56, because we met with people like Livermore at that time, for example, or Herb Whittaker, and we started discussing the possibility of creating a school, because the Dominion Drama Festival had tried to do so previous years, during the previous years. So we started discussing with DDF people and people like Livermore, and that's how the project of the National Theatre School took form. And immediately I would say the National Theatre School played an important role in the development of the Quebec theatre, as far as the training of the actors and the technicians were concerned. And a few years later, I would say maybe 4 or 5 years later, a writing department was created in the French subdivision of the school. And that was really a very important thing that happened in the development of the Quebec theatre, because some young people who were interested in writing, who would otherwise probably go in writing novels or poetry, were attracted to theatre. And that's how a good number of playwrights started to write plays in Quebec, and started to be produced.
We have names like Toupin, Dubé, Ferrand. Who are your favorites of Quebec, by the way, or who do you?
10 seconds.
Yeah. I was just using up the tape now. I don't think you need to answer that question. We don't really have to. Actually, we're all out of time, and you have to go, in fact.